Welcome to the Abundant Soul podcast with your co-hosts Ashley and Steph, where we embark on a journey of self-discovery and spiritual awakening. In this week's episode, we will explore the complexities of imposter syndrome, personal growth, and the journey towards self-trust. We share our personal experiences and insight on managing emotions, as well as the importance of awareness. We will also explore how past experiences shape our present feelings and behaviors. We hope to create a safe space for you to reflect on your own journey and challenges. Now, let's dive in. Hello!
Hello!
How are you?
I am doing really good. How are you doing?
Very good. I'm so excited. Our first episode is here. And it's bringing a lot of emotions, I would say, like excitement, fear, and yeah, I'm starting to flush. So yeah, I'm very, very excited. I'm excited to be here with you.
Feels like interesting because we always have these little chats. Now we're just recording them because I feel like every time you and I like connect and have these chats, we always get into these deep conversations. So now it's like we're recording them, which is cool.
I love it. And what's the funniest things is when we were preparing that podcast, so we met one time per week, and honestly, we spoke for like an hour about different stuff, and then 5 to 10 minutes before the end, we were like, so about the podcast, where were we? What do we have to do? And that's actually how we ended up saying like, hey, we are going to talk about what we go through, right? Because we always come up with deep conversations, and there are always things going on in our lives. And we believe that people also have this kind of like emotions going through. And even if it's not the same situation, they will relate at some point here and there.
Yeah. I think too, like just having that safe space where you can feel seen and heard. You know what I mean? Even like sometimes I'll hop on the call with you and I'll be like, okay, we're going to talk about the podcast. And like you say, we get into these deep talks and it's just whatever comes up at that time. It's like, oh, I want to say this to Steph, or what about this? And we just do this like ebb and flow, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I know there is one thing that we wanted to talk about that you are going through. And I kind of had a little bit of it yesterday, which is imposter syndrome.
Yeah. I like have a certain feel about it because I feel like when you just say the word, it's like recognizing that yes, that is real, and I experienced that, and yeah, it's. I think what I told you yesterday was I'm having right now, like definitely going through it, but then having these little glimpses of like, dang, I kind of just like overcame that today. Or like I chose the opposite of imposter syndrome today. Like I chose to see things differently. So yeah, it's a crazy ride with the imposter syndrome. And I'm noticing you it's just like a spiral, you know, like you're never, okay, I no longer experience that, or I'm through it. It's like, okay, you got through like this little challenge, but I'll be back again. Like I'll be back to test you.
Always.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting because right now in my life, I'm doing a lot of things that are new to me. And I feel like this is the first time in my life that I'm like following my heart. Like, does this resonate with me? Do I want to do this? Is this a dream or a passion of mine? So it feels really different than how I was maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, where it was like, this is what I should do. This is what I think other people expect of me to do. And it was so, like, I put myself in those boxes. You know what I mean? Like, when you really think about it, like, I stop and think, and I'm like, I don't know that I had pressure from anyone to do a certain career or be a certain way. I think it was my own pressure or thinking that I needed to do that. So once I started like shifting and, you know, started to follow things that lit me up, things that inside of me that were like, oh my God, this is really exciting. If I do this, what's it like if I try? That's when the imposter syndrome just like grew, because again, it was on me. And I think it's this big theme of, do I trust myself? Which is crazy, because if if I were to ask you, like, Steph, do you trust yourself? What would you say?
No.
No?
Oh no. I have this big imposter syndrome, and I was sharing earlier with you that I have a manager that found me 4 years ago, and she reached out to me on LinkedIn. I was looking for a job. I was not into that field yet, and she completely believed in me. And she still does. We had a call yesterday. And I feel that she believes in me more than I do myself. And when you mentioned about imposter syndrome yesterday, how it come up with me is that huge voice that says that, oh no, you're not capable. Why you? Like, why you out of all of these people? Why does she trust you? Right? I have like all the fear and doubts that came out. And before, I used to like really being caught up in my stories. And I will not take the step, or I will not say yes because of the fear. The fear was too strong for me to pass through it. And as I, got into like personal growth, and as I worked on myself, and I did a lot of exercises for self-worth, self-confidence. I worked a lot with that. I'm still working with it. So now I'm able, first of all, to hear that this voice is just there. It's just a voice. It's just a thought. And the thought is not me. Right? It could be there. It's more about a protective self that is like, hey, if you're starting to do that, you're going to expose yourself. You may make mistake, which is okay, but it's like, it really wants to prevent you not to make any mistake. So now I'm able to recognize when I hear that voice, depending how I'm feeling, I can or cannot still listen to that voice. Or it may take me a few days before realizing that, like, okay, I need to stop that. Like, I need to like focus, ground myself, like everything's gonna be okay, like trust that, yes, I am capable of doing it. But it's, like you said, it's always coming back. It always comes back. So we cannot eradicate that voice.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I love what you said about, like, when you start to become aware of it, that it's like, this is the little voice that's like trying to keep me safe, protected, or like keep me from expansion for whatever reason. When you start to recognize it, that's such a weird feeling, because, for example, like when I was doing my yoga teacher training, I put so much pressure on myself for my final, we call them teach backs. So you have 1 hour to teach your flow, and you do it with other people in your teacher training. And by this point, it's the end of yoga teacher training. So you're all really close. You're with a bunch of supportive people who are rooting for you. But getting up there and beginning my flow, I was still so nervous. I put so much pressure on myself. And I remember like, oh, I forgot to do ragdoll pose. And I was like, just keep going, just keep going. And then by then I was in my head way too much versus in my heart. And by the end of it, all I could think about, all I could remember were the things that I forgot. And my gosh, everyone probably knows. They're probably like, oh my gosh, she forgot this. And I was so nervous. I took my little microphone off. And I went straight to our teacher, because she sat in the corner and she would be like writing notes. I wouldn't even make eye contact with like my Kula, our group, because I was so nervous. I thought I was like, I can't believe I did this. Like, maybe I'll get a redo. And then I sat there and I was like nervous to look her in the eyes. And I just blurted out like, I did this wrong, I did this wrong. And she was like, calm down. She's like, look at what I wrote. And it was like these amazing things, like excellent, and like all these great things. And she was like, take a breath. Like, you did so well. And as she's telling me all these nice things, amazing things coming out of her mouth, I could not even hear her. All I could hear was like the wah, 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 wah. And I just sat with myself and I was like, how are you so hard on yourself? She's telling you how you basically passed with flying colors, how great everything was, and you don't see that in yourself. Like, this is a huge problem. And for me, that was a moment where I was like, okay, imposter syndrome was huge. Like, that took over front and center. I couldn't even enjoy doing my final. Like, okay, everyone, I'm going to get up and show you what I came up with, and this is what we're going to do. Because that imposter syndrome was like, you can't teach a yoga class. You think you can do this? No. You forgot ragdoll pose, so no one's ever going to come to your class again. When it's the opposite. You know, nobody knows those little things. You just keep going. But when that imposter syndrome gets so loud, it's almost like it got a little breadcrumb to just expand on. It's like, oh, you forgot that one pose, so now everything, you can't do this. You're not good enough. So,
I love what you say because that is so real, and I got chills.
oh,
Actually. Yeah, chills when you were. I can definitely relate in so many occasions, and you know what you said about focusing on everything that you consider negative, like
ooh, yeah.
all the negativity and being, you know, you want to be perfect, right? You want, you want to go like to the top, like that's ego driven instead of leading by the heart. Like that's what you said, like being too much in the mind and sometimes getting out of your mind and more into your body, your feeling, your heart. That's what will allow you like to really go into your flow. And well, you are teaching yoga now.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I am teaching now, so I won. I beat the imposter syndrome in that scenario.
And how do you feel now in giving those classes from, you know, the yoga teacher training where you had all these like thoughts and like feelings and focused on negativity to now you give what, 2 to 3 classes per week?
Right, yeah, 2 classes a week.
So what do you now, like, how do you feel? And was there an evolution also from the teacher training to the classes?
Well, going from yoga teacher training, again, we had 10 in our class and 2 awesome teachers. So there's 12 of us and we were all so supportive. So then going into real life where, you know, and everyone does yoga for different reasons. So when someone comes to your class, you know, sometimes I'll have people who want to be in the back corner, don't want to make eye contact. They're there, that's their own hour, their own practice. And yes, that's like the whole point. I'm just there to guide a sequence. You just show up for you and you take the hour to yourself. But you got some people who, and again, for someone who wants perfection, and I think I've shared this with you before, I'm like a recovering perfectionist. It's like, oh my gosh, are they not looking at me because they hated this? Did they not like what I said in the opening? Do they not like this song? And again, that's being so much in your head. And I have had to learn to recognize when I'm in my head, when I start to have that imposter syndrome, when I start to feel that anxiety coming like this, it's like I am not in my heart. And I notice when I teach from my heart, when I'm just there and I allow myself, yes, I'm guiding the class, but can I feel the music? What do the lights feel like? What does my mat feel like? Like when I really, I guess, ground myself through sensory stuff, that's when I can come back to why am I even doing this? Because I love this. Like yoga helped me through really dark times. So I want to share that and have someone else feel that, even if it's one person in the class. So it's interesting to go from, my gosh, I only have, 4 people showing up today. What's that mean? Oh my gosh. Is it because someone didn't like my playlist from last week? It's like all these things when it's like, I read a quote one time that a yoga teacher said, don't worry about how many people are showing up to your class because that's your ego, right? Like you want a full class because that would make you feel validated like you're a great teacher. But sometimes you have smaller classes because there may be one person or all 4 of those people that really need what you have to offer. And so it really needs to, like your energy needs to kind of be able to, be received by them. So that's why, like, and so I try to stay grounded in that too, that it's like, if there's only 4 people that show up today, that's okay, because there's going to be something magical that happens with the 5 of us that day. But it's definitely not easy to do when you're having big emotions. Like when your imposter syndrome is so loud and you feel flooded with the, I should have done this, or, oh my gosh, like this is wrong, or this isn't right. Your emotions are so loud that you become like irrational. And it's so hard to be like, how do I get back to my heart? How do I ground? What grounds me? It's like you forget all of those things.
Oh, we forget.
Yeah.
Oh, we forget. We are into the storm and like nothing will help. Or at least we think nothing will help. And we get like angry and anxious and like all these like emotions. And it's like, and even I do notice that even if I'm aware, I will be like, okay, I'm into my head, like nothing is going well, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, I'm going to focus on my breathing. I focus for 1 breath and I'm back there. And I'm like, bah, 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 bah. And then sometimes I forget for like 10 minutes. And then I come back and I'm like, oh, wow, wait a second, like back there. And I feel that it's a practice. The more you do it, the more you're able like to pull you outside of your mind.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just can't. So I feel like we have to go with the flow. Like the times where you can't, like maybe we need like to shake it off. Like maybe we need to take a walk or something, and maybe we need to yell in a cushion, like to, because we can't stuff our emotions. Like we can't. It's gonna explode at some point. Maybe we will have more anxiety. Maybe we will have more anger. So sometimes what we need is, yes, maybe the ego is stronger and maybe you are angry because only 1 person showed up. So, well, maybe not during your yoga, but afterwards, like maybe you need a good yell or, like a good shake when you feel like anger and like, why there only 1 person showed up, and you could like shake yourself. That's a good way also to get rid of the energy and could help you coming back to a regulated state, so a more like calm and grounded state. So that's one way where you can help yourself getting back to there. And afterward, you could do the work on your imposter syndrome. Like, what was the trigger when you are in a quiet mind? Because when you're into that feelings, like, you just can't. It's very hard to come back to reality.
Yeah.
I would quote unquote.
Yeah. Okay, I love what you said about coming back to it. First, I love what you said about viewing it as energy. So, right, so if I'm having these big feelings of imposter syndrome or big feelings in general, if I don't express it or move that energy out, it's still going to be inside of me. Like, I like to visualize it as like a pinball. And so it's like you choose your own adventure with how you want to get the energy out. Do you want to yell and scream into like a pillow or an open field? Do you want to dance, shake? Like, the energy has to come out. Even talking, right? Talking about it can be great. But if you don't, because sometimes we're like, oh, I'm not in a place I can do that. I love what you said about coming back to it. Because if you don't, that pinball is just like, you're just going to be adding more pinballs and you're going to be so unfocused and have all these feels just needing to be released. Mm-hmm. So I love that you said, if you can't do it in the moment, being mindful of like coming back to it to either do some sort of energy release or even sit with it, process it, like, why did I feel that way? Like, what was that limiting belief? And sometimes going back to matching it or finding a similar time period or experience where you felt the same, that's when you're like, oh, this makes me feel like I'm 4 years old again and nobody is picking me for kickball. And you're like, what? But it's like when you just kind of allow time to be like, okay, let me think about this. And just not quiet the mind, but just see what comes up. And when that happens, you're like, wow, I mean, that's like a whole nother topic we can like.
I was gonna
Deep
say,
dive
like,
into
you just touch like the tip of the iceberg of what we call the inner child work. And that's actually how we met, Ashley.
Yes.
And we'll have, like, I think tons of conversations with that.
Yep.
But basically, in a child, like, we have all these trauma that are like kind of stuck in the body where that happens during your childhood. And those trauma, whether big or small, they impact your adulthood. So like when you mentioned, if you had a feeling when you were 4 years old, it will transfer to your adult, and you were like, oh, maybe at 4 years old you didn't get your ice cream and you really wanted that ice cream, so you felt like you didn't get enough and you were not enough. So as an adult, maybe you will feel like, oh, all my friends are able to buy this and that, and I can't, so I'm not enough.
Yeah.
And it's the same feeling, same emotion. So going to the root, of the emotions will able to untie the knot, and you will be able like to feel free, like, and not get triggered by situations that would normally get you like so mad or so sad or so emotional. But we're gonna do a podcast for sure around that.
Oh yeah, multiples.
multiples.
Yeah. Man. Okay, so coming back to imposter syndrome, what do you think was the point where you noticed that you could see it as different from what's truth for you? Like that you could view it as, I'm experiencing imposter syndrome versus I am telling myself and I know in my heart that I cannot do this. You know what I mean?
That's a tricky question. I have to say that the first exercises I did was around awareness. Awareness about the thoughts. Doesn't matter if it were good, bad, happy, sad. I had to do a lot of work. So whether it was journaling or like sitting, I had some kind of all kind of different exercises. So I tried journaling for a few times. I'm not crazy about journaling, so it didn't last long. Then it was like putting notes on my phone saying, oh, okay, what am I feeling right now? And having some pauses during the day where I'm like, okay, 5 minutes check up. How am I feeling? Oh, I'm noticing that, I'm angry because I didn't do this on time. Why am I angry? So like really bringing awareness to how I feel in that particular moment, how my body reacts, and what are my thoughts.
Wow.
And that's when now it's easier and faster for me to hear my voice or feel better when I'm tense. But I still have to pause. And like you mentioned earlier, when you're already in your story, like in your feelings, it's really hard to take a step back.
Yeah.
The other thing I'm going to add, for me that was transformative, was with my son. And the awareness, like I saw him interact, like I saw him having big emotions. I'm seeing myself being the exact same emotions. Okay, I'm having the same age as my son as we have, a discussion. And like initially I was totally caught into like, yes, do it. No, don't, like the little fight back and forth, and me being the mom, and I want you to do that, and he doesn't want to do that. So, but basically we are two young kids like fighting with each other, and like working on being aware, like all the awareness. And he taught me a lot. I was observing him, and then I was observing myself. And it's taking a long time. It's a journey. It's a journey of paying attention. Pay attention when I walk. What is dysregulating me? What I'm like, suddenly I feel like all tense. I'm like, oh, okay. There is a car that make a huge noise and I got like super like tense. Oh, okay, that I got dysregulated. Okay, like chill out, come back to your, and then what played in my mind? Was I scared because I was going to be run over? So it's all the little moments from our day to day where it's like, I will notice my thoughts. And then once you notice, that's when you are most of the time able to shift your thoughts and say, hold on, hold on.
Yeah.
And what about you?
I think that was the hardest, because I can see it as before I would notice I was having emotions or thoughts, and then after. It's like a before and after. I don't know a specific event. I mean, I think it's kind of like this healing journey. So I'd say, gosh, what is that going to be? 2 years? 2 years I've been on like a healing journey. And we'll get into that kind of stuff in another episode. And what you said was how you notice when you're feeling dysregulated. Because old me, before my healing journey, I wouldn't understand what that meant. I had always heard fight or flight, but I don't think I truly understood what that meant. And helping me see it as, like, I'm a very visual person. So when people would say, oh, you're dysregulated, or come back to your breath, I was always like, what does this mean? Like, what are you saying? So I visualize it as like, you have like little people in your body, like, they got their control center. They're working in your body with physical, emotional, mental, all of that, but they can't see the outside. So they rely on you. So if you see a jaguar, right, you're like, oh my gosh, that's a threat. And they're like, oh my gosh, we are being threatened. All systems go. But then if you're like, oh my gosh, I have to do a presentation in 15 minutes. You're like, what you're alerting to them is the same as if there is a real threat. And so being able to discern, is this a real threat? Is this life-threatening? Or what is this big emotion that I'm having, and how can I kind of ground myself, come back to my heart, and just be like, I'm just nervous. This isn't a threat to my life. I'm just feeling nervous. I'm just feeling anxious. That was really interesting for me to learn, especially when you're flooded with emotions. You have high anxiety for, getting up to give a speech. And then it's just like helping to bring yourself down. Like, these are just humans that you're speaking to. You're just talking to people. Like, you love talking to people. It's going to be fine. You're going to be fine. And just slowly like bringing it back down. And then noticing that that's a way that you can regulate your nervous system, get it back to balance. And then learning about the breath too. Because again, I would hear all the time like, oh, if you're feeling out of sorts, just come back to your breath. And I'm like, what does that statement mean? And I cannot stand it when people say that, because it's not, I didn't have a frame of reference to tie it to, and it was not clicking for me. And then going back to yoga teacher training, we learned a lot about the breath, about how it's kind of like this mediator, like it connects your physical to your mental. And it's like sometimes these two fight, but your breath can be like the mediator if you just like give it the yes, go ahead, where you just use your breath, where it feels like you're like, I should be doing something. I'm just breathing. I do this all the time. But then when you notice, you start to regulate yourself and you calm yourself, you're like, what? How am I just now learning about this?
And there's so many stuff that running through my mind. I'm like, oh, I want to say this, I want to say that, I want to say that. And I'm going to forget like half of the thing. I love that you share about the breath, and it's so powerful. Mm-hmm. And once we start to understand like how it affects your body and the different breaths, because like, yes, you can breathe through the two nostrils, but you could also breathe from one nostril and alternate, and like do the square breathing, and like you have different techniques that will play differently, and some of them will work better on you than others. Mm-hmm. So that's you are the scientist into the world. Like you can play experiments and see what works best and what doesn't work that best. And sometimes, depending of which situation, you will use one, and sometimes you will use another one. So I love that. And when you mention like all the little people in your body, it made me feel. I don't know if you know, we had this show when I was young. It's called Il était une fois la vie, which is I don't know, like Once Upon a Time Life. I don't know if my translation is right, but it's about it's a scientific show. And we used to learn like red blood cells and white blood cells, and there are all these little peoples that live inside your body. And so let's say a virus comes in, which is the bad guy, and all the little peoples who like, let's get ready, and you know, like all the troops will come there, and I have to show you the show.
Oh my gosh. Because
so
if this
when you
is
said that, I was like, that exactly that. So from the eyes, like they had all kind of range of different like episodes, and I think one of them was like, if you see a danger, what happens? And you see like, oh, the cells from the eyes would go there, and oh, I received a code that say alert, alert, like, let's go. So
yes.
that's exactly what you share. I'm like, oh, did she see the show? Because that's
my gosh.
exactly that. I'm visual too, so that really resonated with me, and so.
Well, I definitely want to watch that show, because what is coming up for me is Fraggle Rock.
I don't know this
So
one.
that was a show back in like the 80s and 90s, where it was little people and they worked in caves. And I don't remember it. So it wasn't focused on the body, but I remember being like, oh, that must be like what people, you know, like how your body functions and when your arms move and everything. There's little people in there that are just like helping you. So I want to see your show, because that feels more, I don't know.
Oh, I think you're going to relate to that show.
I mean, this is exactly what's in my head.
I will send you that later on.
Awesome.
And I also wanted to piggyback on like the emotion of like fear and like stress before, you know, like presentation or so. And one of the things that I heard and learned is that the feeling of like the fear and stress is the same as the one for excitement. It's just the way we look at it. So like when you're stressed, right? Like sometimes I experienced that when I used to dance, and we had our last show, and I hated the before the show, like the stress, like the stage fright. And then when I was on the stage, I loved it. And the after, like, you know, you have this rush of emotions, like it's amazing. You feel like you're in heaven, like it's amazing. But all of that, like the fear, the stress, like this feeling is exactly the same as excitement, because I was also excited. And I know the outcome also. I know that I will feel so good afterward. So that's something that I've been learning to rephrase and say, oh, you know, I'm scared about like this or that, this meeting, or then I'm like, no, I'm excited. The feeling that I have is excitement, because the feeling that you have is exactly the same. It's just the way you look at it. And I've been trying to teach my son also. I was like, are you excited for your test? And he was like, I am. Like, it's excitement that you feel.
Oh my gosh. Okay, something that I love that you said is knowing the outcome. And I think that is something that plays a huge role in whether you're excited or you're nervous, scared, anxious, which should be the thrilling part, right? As a human, you're like, I don't know what the outcome could be. It could be anything. And I feel like we tend to always look at the worst case scenarios rather than the best case scenarios. Right? You're not like, I could get on this stage and someone hears my speech and they're like, oh my gosh, like, do you want to come do this amazing thing? Like all these great things. We're always like, oh my gosh, someone's going to be like, she stuttered or she stopped talking for a long period of time. And so it's interesting to see that it's like if we don't know the outcome, it's so much scarier because we don't think about all the good that could happen. It's like all the bad that could happen. And the bad's not even that bad. It's all challenges, lessons. But not knowing the outcome, that is so crazy. Because I feel like I can see myself in every imposter syndrome. Like, if I would know the outcome, I probably wouldn't have these big feelings. I wouldn't feel anxious. I wouldn't have the sweaty palms, the like,
You would not be
racing.
human.
Yes, exactly.
No emotions. We're not human. Like
Yeah.
we live with the emotions. That's a human thing. And imposter syndrome is part of that. And well, I felt that you were talking to me with, the speech and going on stage. And like, I have this huge imposter syndrome. And, a little bit of my journey around like the speaking and learning to love my voice, which is still a learning process. And me, like with English, not using always the right words. And even in French now, because I was born in France, but I lived in Quebec for so long, so I kind of mix both languages because, well, for anyone who doesn't know, the French from France and Quebec are a little bit different, and it's the similar than the US English and the English from England. So,
Yeah.
You will understand each other, but some words will be different, like garbage and rubbish. So... Same idea. So now I speak a mix of everything. Like that's my signature, I guess. But it took me a very, very long time to accept that, to accept my voice, the tone of my voice, my accent. Like some days are better than others. When I'm tired, my English is very bad. And I will really judge harshly myself. Podcasting was a huge accomplishment for me because I've been working my way on, again, accepting my voice and sharing my voice with others. So, so when you were sharing that, I'm like, yes, you were talking to me there.
Yes. Well, I think it's fascinating that you can speak so many different languages, dialects and everything. It's like, man. So I love it. Like, I feel like anytime I hear someone with an accent, I'm like, oh my gosh, they must speak a different language. Like, that's so freaking cool.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
I'm going to take the compliment.
Yes. I mean, I don't. I speak one language, but it's just like, man, that would be so cool. I have all these questions like, well, how do you know when to switch? And like, what does it feel like? And I remember a gal that we used to manage together, when she would interview our bilingual candidates, she'd always ask, like, what language do you dream in? And I'd be like, that's so interesting. And she's like, because you can dream in different languages, and for a lot of the time, they'll dream in like the language they speak the most. And I was like, interesting. Okay. I was like, I never thought about that, like what it must be like to know different languages, and fascinates me.
I remember you mentioned that. I was like, oh, that's true. I never thought about it. And my answer was like, when I dream, I will speak in the language to whom I'm speaking with. So if I'm dreaming about you, I will dream in English. If I'm speaking to my husband or son or my family in France or in Quebec, it's going to be in French. So that's how I operate.
So cool. Fascinating.
Yeah. But coming back to imposter syndrome, like this one, like the podcast for me is a huge one where I had to work through a lot of emotions. Like, why me? Who am I to have this podcast and to share my voice? Again, like, it's a lot. I have a lot around my voice, and like, who will want to listen to me? And I heard one day that from Kathy Heller, which is a podcaster, a huge podcaster, and she said, if you can make an impact on only one person, that's all you need. I'm like, yes, that's my why. That's my why, and that helped me kind of overcome. And, well, you were there, so there is the support as well. I had my husband's support. Like, so, it's like you are not alone. Like, yes, you
Yeah.
have these voices. And believe me when I say, like, I had this moment where, like, okay, if Ashley wants to pull out of the podcast, will I continue? So I had this fear that first, you would pull out. And second was like, I was not trusting myself whether I will continue or not. And I was like, I'm totally okay if you pull out. Like, I would not be angry, but I was more concerned about, like, me. Like, how can I not say, like, well, I'm just going to continue? Like, why? I was like, oh my God, no, so that was a huge work with me that I had to sit and be like, okay, like, I can do it. And my husband was like, you can do it. Like, why? Why are you even questioning this? I'm like, I don't know. Then that I had all these voices in my head where were like, well, no, you cannot. Like, you need Ashley. You just cannot do it. Maybe you all will stop altogether. So I had, yeah, that was a huge working process, huge one there.
Yeah. And that's like going back to do you trust yourself? I think so, which is the hardest thing. I think it's easier to trust other people than to trust your own self sometimes. I guess that's kind of specific to situations, but yeah, the imposter syndrome of like, or even thinking, well, there's so many other podcasts out there. Like, there's so many other people that like talk about this kind of stuff. Like, who's going to care about us? Who's like, we're just, regular people. Like, who's going to care about that? But then when I think back to impacts, like when people have said things to me that I've had my own little aha moments or epiphanies, or like, I'm like, dang, that really resonates. Like, yes, it's been sometimes watching, the motivational speakers and things like that. But sometimes it's like the person standing next to you in line at the grocery store, or the person you sit next to on the plane, where you're just like, it grounds you and brings you back to like, we're all humans and we're all having similar or same fears about things. Like when you see someone get up there and they just rock their speech and then they come off stage and they're like, oh my gosh, I threw up this amount of times, or, this ran through my head, and you're like, I wouldn't have even known. And it's just, everyone deals with it, I feel like, in some form or another. It creeps up, and it's almost like life is this journey of like learning how to tame that imposter syndrome so you can keep expanding. And the more you follow like what's already in your little heart and your little soul, it's like that part of you is like, come on, like slay the dragon, like tell the imposter syndrome to get out of the way, because we got stuff to do. Like, we got this, that, and the other.
I love what you're saying. And when I hear you said that, it made me remember that all the greatest speakers in the world, they all get stressed. And 2 weeks ago, I was at Christine Hassler's, the life coach, huge life coach on inner child. So she had a workshop, and she was sharing that, yes, she does get some, like, a little bit of fear before she goes to give her workshops. And like talking about, how she shared her idea. I'm like, wow, she's amazing. But she started and she says, I'm tired, and, I may switch my words, I may stumble. And I'm like, oh my God, she's talking to me. She gave me like inspiration, like to share later on. I'm like, I felt that she was only talking to me to say it, like, it's okay. Like, I may stumble on my words, that happens. And she's an amazing speaker. So all of it to say that they all experience, even the greatest speakers, even the greatest CEOs, even the greatest like movie stars, they all have this fear that creep up at some point, maybe every time, but we don't see it. We just see, the perfect picture on when we are on stage or in the movies. But like you said, we are all humans. And we must remember that. And that's actually why we wanted to do this podcast, like to share that we all experience same things. And you can find people that are exactly the same, where you can relate and that you are not alone.
Yeah.
You are not alone, and if you need help and if you need support, like there will be someone.
Yeah. Yes. 100%. I love what you said about that. Because it's like when you're going through it, and that's why I love that we're doing this podcast, that we get to talk about all the muck, all the gross, awkward, uncomfortable feelings, because as much as we can tell you, everyone can tell you all day long, like, oh, that's where growth happens. When you're in it, when you're covered in the muck and the mud, you're like, this is not fun. This is really hard. No, it doesn't look like anyone else is going through this kind of crap. Why me? You know, it's like there's so many feelings that you have. And if you can see it as like you have a choice, you know, you have a choice in how you view it, just what you talked about with excitement or fear. It's the same feelings. It's how you look at it when you're sitting in the muck. Because I've been in the muck a lot throughout my life. And now I've started to work on mindset to where it's like, okay, this is a really difficult time, but if I can remember back to all the other difficult times, I always came out way better. This, I'm starting to view them as like what I call like expansion moments. Like this is a growth moment. Like this is really hard right now because in some way there's like a preparation going on for me to like do something different or greater or better. Even though when you're in it, again, when you're flooded with those emotions, you're like, how am I going to get out of this? How could this get any better? This is the worst thing. Because it's like your imposter syndrome has just like jumped over in the driver's seat, taking the wheel. It's like, yeah.
He's having the time of his life.
Right?
Like, hello.
Yes,
I'm
partying
having
it
a
up.
party. But the muck. I love this
The
word,
muck.
the muck.
Yes.
And it reminding me, I've heard Jamie Kern Lina, I may be butchering her name, but she said, before being a butterfly, the caterpillar has to go through the cocoon. And what we don't see in the cocoon, it's all slimy and disgusting before it's out. So the growth period that you just mentioned is us being in the cocoon. And it's gonna be the muck.
Yeah.
It's gonna be slimy and like you're gonna like try like move and but you're stuck there. Like you have all these boundaries, which is most of the time your mind. And you're gonna have to work through that, go through like ugly muck, like emotions. And once you get out of that, that's your transformation. That's where you become the butterfly. That's how you level up your growth. That's how you expand after that. But we have to go through that cocoon stage.
Yes.
And that's like, most of the time, we don't want to be in that cocoon stage. We just want to jump through to be the butterfly. I wish. But I also learned that, and again, it's a journey because when we are in the muck, it's, like you said, it's no fun. It's no fun. And when I started this journey, so the inner child really started for me, this inner child journey, which was for me the most transformative work that I've done and still doing. Started in 2021. Before that, I've done a lot of yoga and meditations, but for me, inner child has been transformative. So I started in 2021 when I was really depressed. And, well, I didn't like being in the muck. Well, I still don't like it, but I was not understanding it. So I felt like a victim, like everything was horrible, like it was the end of the world. And I didn't like sitting with my feelings. Hey boy, I did not like it. I did not like it. I still don't like it, but I didn't want it. Did not want to sit with my feelings, my emotions, my ugly like truth also. Because we have to be true. Doesn't matter if it's like pretty or ugly. Like we have to be true. What is our truest emotions? But now, and I've done like again since 2021, it's a journey. Now I still don't like to sit with my feelings, but I know that I'm going to have a nicer payoff at the end, that I'm going to grow from it. So I will sit in my feelings. Doesn't matter how ugly it gets. And I will really allow me to stay with that feeling. I'm crying a lot during that time. It's like riding through the wave of emotions. And I learned what it meant. Because literally, like, I cry. Then I stop crying. I'm like, oh, I'm good. I'm better. But like 5 minutes, and I stayed seated. 5 minutes later, I cry. Here we go again. And I was like, oh, what is that? Like riding the wave. Like, it's like crying better, crying even more better, crying even more. I'm like, whoa, what is going on? So that is, to me, that is riding the wave of the emotions. Same with anger. Like I will get angry, and then I will do an anger burn, which is like releasing the emotions of anger and energy. And then I will, I was like, I have nothing to be angry about. And then suddenly like, whoa, this rush. I'm like, yeah. So that's what is riding the wave of emotions. And now I will do that until I'm like peaceful for a certain like period of time. Not after 2 minutes, because I know I need to stay sit.
Yeah.
But it's
That's
practice.
Cool. Riding the waves of emotion and just letting it come.
Mm-hmm.
And I think going back to what you said earlier, like, it's important that we allow time, even if we need to take time, after we get home from work or after we get home from the gym or whatever. Because then you have as much control as you can have over it. Because if you keep suppressing, you keep bottling it up, then there's going to come a time where you have no control. And it gets to a point where it's like, okay, we're releasing these emotions now, and you don't get to choose how it comes out, when it comes out, or how long it takes. And being in those moments, oh man, you're just like, well, oh my God. So it's like,
why did I do that?
Yes, now I see the value in, taking time to process it myself, let it out, let it go. Sometimes it can be awkward. You just have like explosive crying or explosive anger, and you're like, wow, that didn't need to be that much. But that just felt like, sometimes when after that you feel so much lighter, and you're like, wow, that was a lot of built up stuff that I just released.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not just about the current situation. Sometimes,
Right.
actually, most of the times there are deeper root cause. So, like, everything that you can release, like, just let it out. Let it out. And like you mentioned, being in a safe space, like having control. You can have control with that. Like, give yourself a date with yourself where you're not going to be disturbed. You're, by yourself in your home or in your apartment. And it's a date with yourself for you to, like, having some control if you want to, and let it out. Let it out as much as you can.
Yeah.
It helps so much with that.
Yeah.
Having some control. And I want to come back to the imposter syndrome, because I just remember something about, we were talking all about the awareness and, how we hear that little voice in your head, and that's, it creating stories that may not even be true. And I want to share that there is one way where you can really detach from this voice, and it's to give it a name. So it's not you. And that's a good way to be like, okay, I hear you. So my ego, my inner critic is named Sarah. So when I hear that little name, I'm like, okay, Sarah, I hear you. Like, I know you're here. I know you want to protect me. And now I'm like, I got it. I got this. We're going to take baby steps if we need to. Like, I got it. But again, like, we need to be like very grounded to be able to have the awareness and be able like to really detach from the thought and the inner critic and the voice of the ego, because sometimes it's too strong, and like we mentioned before, we can, get overwhelmed with that. But it's really the detachments of the thought that can help you move through and say, hey, here's my why. Hey, Sarah, for me, hey, Sarah, like, I got it, but here's my why. Here's why I want to do that. That's how I want to feel after or when I do that, because it's also the journey, not the ending, right? Like, we also have to focus on the journey and to recognize the little steps and little victory that we have along the way, because we may not have the outcome in the end. And then, like, the inner critic, the bigger ego, will be stronger, and it will become a new limiting belief, and it will prevent you to do other stuff, because
Right.
that one thing failed. If you just focus on the ending and the inner goals, like, you never know what's in store for you. They may
Right.
have bigger plans. So, there is this expression that says, when one door closes, another one opens. Well, that's true. That's true for girls as well. So when you are able, like, to detach from your inner critic and, like, say, here's my goal and here's how I want to feel, and recognize along the way your little victories and say, yeah, I got it, but I was able to do this, that. These are, small but still big victories to push me forward to my goal. That's how you slowly overcome your inner critic and your imposter syndrome, because it's still going to be there.
Yeah. I love that too, because it's like all these little, and not little, but all the points while you're on the journey to the main goal or the big goal, that it's almost like you're telling your imposter syndrome, like, see, look at that. Because we chose this path, look at all this cool stuff that's happening. Check this out. I'm kind of a big deal. And I think that's so important that we remember that too. Because I have a bracelet, actually, I'm not wearing it today, but it says, like, enjoy the journey. Because it's like, if you're on a trail and all you want to do is get to the top of the mountain, you may miss some of the coolest things you'll ever see in your life, because you're not stopping to look what's around you, or, like, is there a point where you need to pivot? Maybe you're not straight going up the mountain. Maybe there's this cooler area that you'll go and there's a beautiful waterfall or something. It's like, again, just being on that journey. Yes, you're going to get to wherever you're going, but still try to stay present and grounded, and don't forget to, like, stop and look around and be like, wow, I made it this far. Or turn around and be like, look where I was, look where I am. Holy crap, that's really cool. Go me. But again, that all comes with practice. Easier said than done. But yes, very cool stuff. And I'm very excited for all the stuff that we get to talk on this podcast about, all the getting through the muck. Again, Steph and I sharing all the stories of the different journeys, things that we've experienced, and then having guests on too that, they share their experiences with us.
Their muck.
Their muck, yes. We will share all our muck stories. Yes, I love it.
I'm so excited, and I mean, time flies.
Yes.
And we both know that we can talk for hours, so
Yes.
that's been fun, and
Yes, this has been great.
we will meet you next week with
Yes.
another podcast, another episode.
Yes. Sunday Fun Days, when we release our episodes.
Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of self-discovery and spiritual awakening. We hope the stories and insights we've shared today have inspired you to embrace your abundant soul and live your life with more presence, purpose, and passion.
Remember, the path to awakening is unique for each of us, but we're all connected by our yearning for deeper meaning and authenticity. So keep an open heart and mind, and trust that the universe will guide you exactly where you need to go.
This has been the Abundant Soul Podcast. See you next Sunday as we continue to explore the depths of spiritual awakening and personal growth.